The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
"40,000 Iraqis are stranded on a mountain as ISIS jihadists threaten them either with death via dehydration if they stay, or death via attack if they try to leave." Tens of thousands of members of one of Iraq's oldest minorities have been stranded on a mountain in the country's northwest, facing a possible slaughter at the hands of the jihadists that surround them if they flee. And Lewis, already starting to run low on supplies, including water, and the fear of dehydration is very, very real. UN groups say that at least 40,000 members of the Yazidi sect, many of them women and children, have taken refuge in 9 locations on Mount Sinjar, which is a craggy, mile-high ridge identified in local legend as the supposed final resting place of Noah's Ark. There's at least another 130,000 more people, many of them also from the Yazidi stronghold of Sinjar, who have already fled to Dohuk in the Kurdish north, or to Erbil, where regional authorities have been struggling for months now to deal with one of the biggest and most rapid refugee movements in decades. There's another man who's hiding in the mountains, and he's identified himself as Nafi. He says, quote, "Food is low, ammunition is low, and so is water. We have one piece of bread to share between 10 people. We have to walk 2 kilometers to get water. There were some airstrikes yesterday against the jihadists, but they have made absolutely no difference. There are at least 500 Yazidis, including 40 children, who have been killed in the last week, according to local officials. The Kurdish minority Yazidis have long been regarded as devil worshippers by the Sunni jihadists. I have, Lewis, unfortunately, zero pragmatic, constructive ideas here. I read one report that said there were attempts at airlifting food and water and supplies that did not go well. Other reports make absolutely no mention of these attempts anyway. I am really at a loss here as to what to even suggest could be done.
There aren't many options, right? You either keep trying to get them supplies through airlifting supplies in, then you run the risk of getting those planes shot down. You airstrike the jihadists. Maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. Or you send in a large ground force, but who's going to do that?
Well, that's the issue, exactly. Who is actually going to get involved here? We see, we can always kind of talk about the United States getting involved. The United States is involved in plenty of stuff as it is. And also, I've been, another one of my interests in following this story has been that it has not gotten the media attention. When you think about, there are 40,000 Iraqis that are stranded with losing supplies, losing water, with less and less water left. This has not really gotten the media coverage that I might have imagined it would at least deserve.
It is pretty shocking. I mean, you would think that 40,000 people who are in a dire situation like this would receive some attention.
We're going to keep following it. We will come to you with more news as we have it. Lewis, if you have to imagine 3 weeks from now, what do you think will ultimately happen? Aside from what you would want to happen, what do you think the news about this will be in 3 weeks?
I think it will probably be bad news.
All right. Well, we're going to keep following it, and hopefully that's not the case. Remember the story from West Virginia of the flammable, licorice smelling water that you were supposed to avoid even having touch your skin because of how tainted it was? It was, of course, connected to fracking. We now have more bad news regarding groundwater and fracking, this time from Washington County, Pennsylvania. Leaks of fracking wastewater have now tainted and contaminated soil and groundwater, prompting the state to issue a violation notice at one site and continue monitoring the water at other sites. The impoundments store flowback and wastewater from multiple Marcellus shale well drilling and fracking operations. It will take 30 to 45 days to get the results of the additional testing, which will try to determine whether there's a kind of plume of contamination in the groundwater. It's amazing to me, Lewis, that now we have a 30 to 45 day period where we're just kind of waiting. How safe is the groundwater? Is the soil contaminated? Is the water fully contaminated? Is this contaminated in the sense of you don't want to drink it at all? Or if you boil it, then it's okay to drink? Is it the type of thing where you shouldn't even be showering with this water? And 30 to 45 days now we have to wait. There should be a flat out moratorium, full stop, on fracking at this point.
Of course, nationwide, there is no good that comes from it. And if you want to talk about the jobs it creates and, I don't know, how it injects money into the economy, we can have that discussion if you don't care about what it's doing to the people of your country and the environment.
And I read this line, and it reminded me actually of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and I'll read it to you. Mr. Januso said the 3 impoundments were constructed incorrectly because their leak detection systems are beneath dual liners instead of between liners, meaning that the leaks in the upper liner aren't detected until the ground is contaminated. It's different from the Deepwater Horizon situation where a $500,000 valve that could have prevented the entire blowout wasn't used in order to save money. We don't know for sure that in this case, they have the 2 liners. They were just improperly built. So it doesn't seem, or placed. It doesn't seem like it's a cost issue. It's an incompetence issue or an oversight. And again, this could have been prevented.
And this isn't the only situation in which fracking will contaminate groundwater. I
No.
mean, in other situations, it had nothing to do with how these chemicals were being stored or byproducts were being stored. It would just happen on its own because this nasty things would leak into water sources.
I got an interesting story in my email from Michael about a restaurant that is charging their customers a minimum wage fee. This is a small cafe in Stillwater, Minnesota, and it's responding to the August 1st increase in the minimum wage in Minnesota of 75 cents an hour by adding a 35-cent fee to all meal tabs. They are now receiving countless angry phone calls from people. This is the Oasis Cafe. The owner, Craig Beamer, said the fee is needed to offset the 75-cent wage hike that took effect on August 1st. This is the first time, this is a key thing, this is the first time that Minnesota has increased its minimum wage in a decade. Even with only 6 servers, Beamer says it will cost him $10,000 a year more to pay servers $8 an hour instead of the federal rate of $7.25. And instead of adding it to food prices, he says he added the minimum wage fee instead. It is setting off a firestorm of debate. I think that this is obviously for making a political statement, because when the cost of meat from the butcher goes up, I've never seen, at least, a fee added that says this is our butcher fee to account for that. You just adjust the price of your entire menu, as happens with inflation, as happens with cost increases all the time. So if we are even to believe him that this minimum wage increase really would put him out of business if he didn't add this 35-cent fee, every other restaurant in similar situations, or almost every other restaurant, when it is a cost increase, when electricity goes up, if rent goes up, the cost is just added to the menu items, not as a fee. This is a deliberate attempt to make a political point.
It seems like it's backfiring too. Yeah, a lot of the customers are angry, but this is what cable companies do, right? Why are restaurants doing it now too? I don't know. It seems like it's just not a good way to run your business.
Some of the customers that were interviewed outside the cafe said that they agree with the decision. I think he did the right thing, said Mike Steffen of Taylor Falls, who also owns a small business in the same town. If nothing else, it's making a bold statement. Charging a minimum wage fee is a passive-aggressive move that seems both childish and counterproductive. And I would actually ask an additional logistical question, which is the receipts have been posted online, and you'll see that this 35-cent fee is added post-tax, right? So you have all of your food items, $10, $5, whatever. Then you have tax, and as an item in addition to tax, a post-tax item, there is this 35-cent fee. My guess, Lewis, is they either didn't talk to an accountant before doing this or have a really terrible accountant, because this is going to be a serious issue when it comes to the accounting at the end of the year. This guy might end up spending more than the $10,000 he says this would cost him in sorting out his taxes if this is as it appears to be on the receipts.
I would imagine that that is illegal, and that 35 cents does need to be taxed and accounted for. Um, I mean, but that could be part of the point too. I mean, he could be trying to say, screw the government.
Yeah, maybe. I think, Lewis, that although it might seem that way based on the type of minimum wage protest that is being done, I don't know that it was thought with that much precision in mind. And I think we'll see at the end of the year. I don't know if people live near this Stillwater, Minnesota place. Would you go to it? Would you not go to it because of this protest in order to protest the 35-cent minimum wage fee? We will follow it. We will see what maybe adding this will cost him even more money because people start boycotting the restaurant. It remains to be seen. We've talked about the insane, hilarious backfiring of this lawsuit against President Obama for his alleged overuse of executive orders. The Democrats able to raise something like $6, $7, or $8 million in a pretty short period of time, as we heard about at the beginning of the week. And now we have a poll assessing the opinion of Americans on this Republican lawsuit against President Obama. And Lewis, it only confirms what we already knew. It makes absolutely no sense, PR or otherwise, for Republicans. In a CBS poll released yesterday, 54% of Americans say they disapprove of the lawsuit against President Obama. 37% say that they do approve of it. There was a similar poll that was conducted by CNN last month, and it found that by a 57-41 margin, Americans oppose this lawsuit against President Obama. What do you think is going on here, Lewis? Do you think that Americans just see through the Republican attempt to further bring down President Obama's presidency and ability to take action? It's just Americans see through it as transparent. Is it just that they believe that lawsuits against the president aren't a good thing unless they're fully aware of what this is about? Or what do you think is going on? Is this an anti-Republican movement?
I mean, if I had to guess, and I can't say with certitude, I would guess that Americans are probably just about finally starting to get sick of the nonsense, of the obstructionism, of the do nothing attitude, do nothing except nonsense like this. That we've seen for so long.
And let's remember, 37% still approve of the lawsuit. So broadly speaking, what we have is Democrats and a majority of independents are opposed to it. And there's still a Republican stronghold that does like the lawsuit. But of course, independents are so important. And I have to be very clear here. Just being opposed to this lawsuit in a poll isn't really that important unless you then translate that into voting in a particular way in this midterm election. That's really what needs to happen. People need to vote the disapproval of the lawsuit and make it take effect by voting out the Republicans that are pushing this in November. And it's always tough to get people to vote in midterms.
It is. And what we've seen so far is that the Republicans are poised to do quite well in midterms. So we'll see.
We will also talk about the possible repercussions for the recent jobs report. We will talk about that with Professor Arnie Kalleberg later on today's program. Also have a great documentary recommendation for you. We have your voicemails. It's a great day to be listening to the show. It's a great day to be watching the show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is, of course, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is producing new weekly video features on their YouTube channel, Liberal Bias Video. To get the latest updates on uncovering liberal bias in the world, subscribe to Liberal Bias Video on YouTube. Today's new member of the day is Amy Bliscoll. Amy Bliscoll, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You are one day closer than you were yesterday to joining the David Pakman Show Membership Hall of Fame. You can become a supporter of this program and keep us independent of support from big corporations and media conglomerates by going to davidpakman.com/membership and read about the ever-expanding laundry list of membership perks also at davidpakman.com/membership. Also, a quick note, we will be here the rest of this week. We will be here all of next week, but the second half of August will be our summer vacation. So once that happens, don't worry, the show hasn't gone off the air. Lewis hasn't been fired. The Jewish puppet masters that control my strings have not fired me. We are just on vacation, and we will, of course, be back and with you straight through to the midterm elections. I have a great documentary recommendation for you today. It's called God Loves Uganda. It is available on Netflix. It is available elsewhere. And it's a documentary film that looks at the influence and connections between American right-wing evangelical Christianity and Uganda. And you might remember we had an interview with Dr. Kapia Keoma, who talked to us about right-wing anti-gay influence in Africa. He is actually featured in this movie. He is interviewed in this movie, as are many others, and they also follow right-wing Christians who go on a mission to Uganda to convert the locals to Christianity. It is very much worth watching. The interview we did, Lewis, with Dr. Kapia Keoma was fascinating, and it did really well, and a lot of people told me they became really interested in the subject. If that was at all interesting to you, this film will really blow your mind. It shows you the on the ground of what's going on there, the missions, the churches that are being built, the brainwashing that's going on. It is really worth seeing.
I like this type of thing. I like learning about how religion is destroying the world.
Yeah, but isn't it a little bit depressing to you because you feel like you can't possibly get in the way and fix all of it?
It is. It's very depressing, yes, but it's still fascinating, and I am optimistic that one day, we can find a cure, David.
You may be aware that there are 19 states plus the District of Columbia that have legalized same-sex marriage. You may be aware that there are several Midwest states facing a long list of lawsuits from same-sex couples that are seeking marriage rights. As it stands right now, more than 75 lawsuits challenging bans on same-sex marriage are pending in 32 different states. This is all a good thing. However, we have some problems, we have some insanity, we have some ignorance happening in Texas, of all places. In support of Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott's effort to reinstate the ban on same-sex marriage, there are 63 different Texas lawmakers that signed an amicus brief this week arguing that if Texas were to recognize same-sex marriage, there could be legalization of incest to follow, legalization of pedophilia to follow, and legalization of polygamy. Here's a quote from the brief. The district court broadened the definition of the existing right to marry as one that includes the right of people to select the partners of their choosing for marriage without regard to sex. If the right to select partners of their choosing is the criterion used to invoke marriage as a fundamental right, then marriage restrictions on age, polygamy, and consanguinity also are ripe for challenge. This is ridiculous, okay? And we have to, when people say this to you, okay, they throw a whole bunch of stuff in, right? They say, oh, polygamy and incest and bestiality sometimes, etc. And it can be sometimes hard to really pick it all apart piece by piece as it really needs to happen. So first and foremost, with regard to incest, there is absolutely no connection at all between same-sex marriage and legally marrying family members, right? Same-sex marriage is related to sexual orientation. It has nothing to do with marrying a brother or anyone else, and anyone who tries to conflate the two and propose this possible slippery slope is just flat out wrong. There is zero connection, no matter how the bigots try to frame it. Number two, with regards to pedophilia, obviously, anyone in their right mind can realize that same-sex marriage is an issue of sexual orientation. It is completely disconnected from age of consent with when individuals are old enough to understand what is going on and to be able to consent to relationships. There is absolutely no connection whatsoever between legalizing pedophilia and the legalization of same-sex marriage. And by the way, being attracted to children of sometimes, as we will talk to you about later on in today's program, sometimes to children of both genders or sometimes to children of just one gender, has nothing at all to do with sexual orientation. And then lastly, with regard to bigamy and polygamy, there are actually many people on both sides of the LGBT discussion that may disagree or agree with bigamy and polygamy being legalized. But again, it has nothing to do with sexual orientation. Whether you want to be in a bigamous or polygamous relationship with multiple wives, multiple husbands, you might be a male and you want to have multiple husbands, or you might be female and want to have multiple wives, whatever, that has absolutely nothing to do with sexual orientation. So again, slippery slopes where there are absolutely none.
And I'm willing to bet that many of the Republicans who signed this probably don't even think that these are valid arguments or that any of this would really happen. But it is a good tactic trying to scare people into thinking that this type of thing could happen.
Another example of why Texas ranks near the bottom when it comes to education, and another example of why it is absolutely horrifying that these same Republicans who signed on to this amicus brief are probably overseeing the rewriting of Texas textbooks. That is seriously frightening.
The textbook situation in Texas is a very scary one. We have talked about that extensively, and I wish I could do something about it being in Texas, but I really can't.
You want to see Brian Fisher from the American Family Association flip-flop within 45 seconds on his program? I think you're going to like this. Within 1 minute, Brian Fisher slammed President Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder as racists, and then immediately started criticizing the term racist and says anyone who accuses others of being racist is playing gutter politics. I'm at a loss for words, so let's look at the first clip, okay? This is the first clip where Brian Fisher accuses Attorney General Eric Holder of being a racist.
He's got an activist attorney general. Eric Holder said, look, I'm an activist attorney general. I make no bones about that. I'm proud to be identified as an activist attorney general. I am not going to prosecute a single case where a white person is the victim. If a white person is the victim, I don't care if they get justice. That's no concern of mine. The only cases I'm going to prosecute are where blacks are the victims. That makes him a racist because he's deciding justice on the basis of skin color. Martin Luther King lost his life campaigning against that kind of racist attitude.
The invoking, by the way, of Martin Luther King by these right-wing bigots is really starting to get a little bit sickening. But again, the main point here, calling Eric Holder a racist. Okay, but wait a second. Then Brian Fisher says this about even using the term racist.
About race. And this disappoints me. I thought Juan Williams was better than this. It's just disappointing to me to see him slide into the gutter of playing the race card, because that's the card you play when you're out of ammunition, when you don't have an argument, when the truth is not on your side, when the facts are not on your side, when logic is not on your side, when the Constitution is not on your side, when the law is not on your side. That's when you start accusing people, calling people names. Very disappointing to me to see Juan Williams stoop to this level.
He's right about one thing. When the facts and logic aren't on your side, you play the race card and accuse people of racism, which is what he did 45 seconds earlier in the same broadcast, Lewis.
Gutter politics is a great term, too, and I think that's what the term you would use to sum up Brian Fisher's entire career.
I also find it funny, by the way, and incredibly distasteful, that these right-wingers now invoke the name of Martin Luther King when they didn't really think so highly of him when he was actually alive, right? The subscription to the school of thought of Martin Luther King after the fact has become increasingly popular among the right, as has falsely claiming that Martin Luther King would have been against gay marriage. That's also become a pretty popular canard among the right, which is, if Martin Luther King were alive today, as a deeply religious man, he would definitely be against two men getting married, which of course is not based in any kind of fact or reality whatsoever. I find it very distasteful that the right now is regularly invoking Martin Luther King to try to prop up their bigotry.
That's it. It is, it's been for a long time, it has been the most effective way to try and make people think that you like black people. Or that you don't hate black people. But I think we're finally starting to see through it and call it out.
Yeah, depending on whether you're setting the bar higher or lower, it's that you like or don't hate, and it depends on the individual. Okay, make sure that you are subscribed to our Reddit discussion forum. Go to davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT, close to 600 subscribers to our Reddit subforum. You can send us stories. You can argue with us, you can argue with other viewers, you can troll people, you can troll us, whatever you want to do, davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. Just kidding about the trolling, though. We actually don't want that. And of course, you can also, if you have a Twitter or Facebook account, you can go to donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. Doesn't cost anything. This is a free way to support our show. You can donate a retweet on Twitter or a reshare on Facebook by going to donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. We'll take a break. Next, we will dissect the latest jobs report with Arnie Caliburn.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Arnie Caliburn. He is professor of sociology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, also the author of Good Jobs, Bad Jobs. It's really great to have you here. You know, we've been talking quite a bit about the latest jobs numbers, and really we've been talking about jobs for years, 4 years, 8 years, who knows? Jobs are always an important issue. So I think a good place to start is when we hear about a new jobs report, as we get monthly, what are the most important things to consider in trying to evaluate whether it is a positive or negative report?
Okay. Well, first of all, is the sheer number, and that's generally what people look at first. But that tells only part of the story. You also look at the unemployment rate, but again, that's affected by whether or not people are actually looking for jobs. So what I like to look at is not only the number of jobs, but the types of jobs that are being created. Are the types of jobs being created in the public sector or the private sector? Are they jobs that pay good wages or bad wages? And importantly, whether or not these jobs are full-time or part-time. These are all important clues to how our economy is recovering. Because while in one sense, a job is a job is a job, in another sense, we've been creating a lot of low-wage, part-time jobs that while they count as a job, they don't really help the workers very much.
So let's explore that a little bit. When we look at this divide or the proportion of full-time to part-time jobs, how does the job creation that we're seeing over the recent years compare in terms of the proportion of full-time to part-time jobs to job creation periods in past times?
Well, what we have now is an unusually high number of what we might call involuntary part-time jobs. These are jobs that people are taking for economic reasons, though they would prefer full-time work. There are two reasons for why a person might take an involuntary part-time job. One is because of a decline in demand in that industry. A second reason is that they would like a full-time job but simply cannot find it because it's not made available to them. And that latter category is what is unusually high. And hopefully it will come down as the labor market gains steam, but that is higher than it has been for a long time. So
let's explore that a little bit, because you mentioned the two possibilities, right? And the demand side of it, and then they would like a full-time job, but one isn't available. When I talk to economists that sometimes are progressive, sometimes are conservative, et cetera, there often seems to be a disconnect between the role, number one, of course, of tax rates on job creation. But number two, there often is a disconnect when people think about the types of jobs that are being made available and what types of economic changes could be put in place that would create more full-time jobs. And I would open this up to you. I'll kind of make it an open question. I never hear mentioned when I talk to conservative economists that if simply we had more money in the hands of those with a higher marginal propensity to consume, that is the poor, the lower middle class, and the middle class, if they had more money, they would likely spend most of that money, and that would stimulate job creation via demand. A lot of these individuals focus on supply side, and I feel that there's not enough attention paid to the importance of demand side stimulus.
Absolutely. And as a sociologist, I tend to look at things a little bit differently. I tend to look at the demand side, and I tend to look at the role of employers and state policy in the job situation. Now, the kind of things you mentioned in terms of providing more money in the hands of consumers, which will stimulate demand, that's exactly what a strong argument is for increasing the minimum wage. And it seems to me that if we are able to increase the minimum wage, there is very little evidence that it's going to result in major job loss or unemployment. It will stimulate demand. Now, that by itself may help to reduce the part-time employment, but not by itself, because there are other incentives that employers have for creating part-time jobs. One of which is a sort of a perverse incentive from Obamacare, which is that companies don't have to provide benefits for people who work less than 30 hours a week. And so there's an incentive for employers to provide less hours. There's also the truth that in America, employers are allowed to discriminate against workers based on whether or not the job is part-time or full-time. This is the last vestige, perhaps, of legal discrimination. But if you have a part-time worker, you are allowed to pay that person less per hour than if the person was full-time. So there are these additional incentives that are economic in base to provide employers with an incentive to not create full-time jobs.
I find it unfortunate that when I have that conversation with many right-wingers, their solution, and I use the term solution incredibly loosely, and you'll see why in a second, their solution is, of course, that there should be absolutely no mandate to provide health insurance to full-time employees, so on and so forth. And I find it very difficult with individuals who are predisposed to that type of thinking to shift the focus to what I think is obvious if you look at every other country at our level of development, which is let's disconnect employment from health insurance and let's take away the for-profit incentive for health insurance. But I feel like that's almost a lost cause with individuals who just feel that they just shouldn't have to provide any benefits, full stop.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 120%. Unfortunately, we have a system in America in which we have employer-provided welfare benefits, which is a accident. It's not an accident, but it was something that developed after World War II, and so we never got the single-payer kind of government-sponsored health system that most other countries have. That would have been much preferable. Given where we are, however, we've got alternative ways of delivering healthcare, and it's incredibly important to try to separate healthcare provision from employment, because one of the characteristics of the recent last couple of decades is that there's a great deal of insecurity, which I call precarity, in the labor force, and people losing their jobs. And a major consequence of that is they lose their health insurance. And so if whatever we can do to provide people with a cushion, that would not only help individuals and their families, but it would also help economic development, as people would be able to start up businesses on their own and so on.
Oh, no question about it. And as a sociologist, I'm sure that you're also interested in something we've discussed, which is if someone is required or needs to stay at a job merely for fear of losing their health insurance if they leave, that doesn't lead to job satisfaction, which, as we know, negatively affects productivity. And further, as a general thing, when people have the ability to kind of be self-realized and self-actualized, not making decisions based merely on the fear of losing health insurance, it's better for everybody. It's better for small businesses. It's better for large businesses. It's really a great economic stimulus for people to be able to work in the field in which they want to work.
Absolutely. I mean, coercion is not a very effective way of defining employment relationships. Employers increasingly depend on the consent and the enthusiasm of workers, especially in our service economy, where customer employee employer and customer relations become so important. It's very important for people to like what they do and to be enthusiastic. That helps them, it helps their families, but it also helps the company to succeed. And we do that by providing the conditions that would increase job satisfaction.
We've been speaking with Arnie Kalleberg. He is professor of sociology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and author of Good Jobs, Bad Jobs. Really a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been talking over the last few years about Pastor John Hagee as well as his son, Matthew Hagee. They both are incredible religious extremists, rife with patriotism, the likes of which we have only seen during Hatriot Mail on this program. And recently, John Hagee gave a sermon where he said the greatest problem in this nation are pro-choice or gay-affirming counterfeit Christians. He also went through a bunch of other issues that might affect the nation's survival. And one of those, he says, is social safety net programs. Of course, this seems to be this huge concern for so-called Christians that people seem to be getting free stuff and that that's really, really a bad thing. And he said the following during his sermon.
To the healthy who can't work but won't work, get your nasty self off the couch and go get a job. America has rewarded laziness, and we've called it welfare. The Bible says, the man that does not work should not eat. I know the liberals hate that verse, but read it and weep. It's God's position. It's God's position.
What a Jesus-like thing to preach, Lewis. What a hypocrite, right? I thought that as Christians, your Messiah was not about hoarding wealth and was about giving to the poor and helping people who are in need. Apparently, I was wrong about that. Or apparently, he's wrong about what Jesus preached.
Well, we've got some differences of opinion here in the church. I mean, you can ask the Catholics about something. You can ask the Lutherans about something. And you'll get some different answers. I guess we know which side Hagee falls on.
I was trying to figure out who exactly is he talking about, right, when he's addressing the lazy people. Maybe he's talking about the young women who now have infants in red states who are on welfare because people like Hagee denied them actual reasonable sex education as well as birth control and reasonable access to abortion services once the first two are denied to them, which of course causes more pregnancies. I have a feeling his narrative might be a little different on cause and effect there, though.
Probably. Despicable stuff. I mean, if you're not supposed to help those in need, what's the point? I mean, is this just a business? I'm sure for him it is.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's a plot to first create poor women and then number two, condemn them, probably all under the umbrella of just controlling women, which is really what we've been talking about for a very, very long time. There is one thing, though. The thing where he said, he who does not work shall not eat, right? He's talking about it as a strictly biblical thing, but I said to myself, I think I've heard someone else use that phrase, and lo and behold, in Vladimir Lenin's 1917 work, The State and Revolution, Lenin says, he who does not work shall not eat, and says that that is a necessary principle under socialism, a preliminary stage, as Lenin saw it, towards a fully communistic society. Pastor John Hagee, in justifying why we shouldn't provide welfare benefits to so-called lazy people who are choosing not to work, has has referenced communist propaganda, and his clueless audience sits there and claps and is none the wiser, Lewis.
It's pretty incredible. I know he has a lot of followers, and I'm sure the vast majority of them just take it all in as if he is God himself. And it's disturbing. It's very disturbing. This
weekend, I took a little break from pleading the blood of Jesus, which I tend to do just on weekends. And I read this story about Matthew Lane Durham, who is a 19-year-old Oklahoma missionary who is accused of and has allegedly admitted to raping several children at an orphanage in Kenya. He allegedly also told a friend that the reason he did it is that he was possessed by a demon named Luke, who made him rape the Kenyan orphans. According to this report, federal prosecutors submitted text messages that were sent to a friend about Luke and the control that this supposed demon had over him. And he said, how can I hate this? How can I not hate this thing inside of me? It takes me at night, and I'm powerless over what Luke wants. Yes, I named him. I know how crazy that is. He whispers in my ear all day, and he's so hard to resist. Durham's friend in these text messages advises Durham to just laugh in the face of the demon and ignore it, but Durham says there's no way that he can ignore the demon. And apparently that is why, when he was doing missionary work with a group called Upendo earlier this year, he ended up allegedly admitting to raping both male and female Kenyan orphans aged 4 to 10. One of those children is reportedly HIV positive. What a disgusting story, Lewis.
I know the rape of Africa by religion is both, I guess, literal and figurative.
Yeah, it's taking on both forms. And can you imagine, Lewis, if at sentencing, if he is eventually going to be sentenced, if this demon possession thing comes up, what would the judge say? In spite of the fact that there has been an allegation that a demon forced you to commit these crimes, there is no factual basis to the real world that shows demonic possession exists. So we're going to ignore the demonic possession in determining your sentence. I mean, how do you deal with that as a judge? Do you even address it, or do you just ignore it altogether?
I guess that depends on the judge, because we've read stories about judges sentencing people to church. So I hope whatever judge it is would realize the ridiculousness of those claims.
One person who emailed me about this story said, David, what's going on here is that Durham sent these text messages to start working up a pretext for an insanity plea to maybe have a sentence mitigated. If he says it was a demon who told him, well, you get a psychiatrist in there who says he probably is schizophrenic, so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, there's no way, of course, to prove that one way or another, but it is interesting that someone emailed me that.
I could see that happening. I could see him also actually believing that there is some type of demon. But either way, I think that he will get put away for quite a long time.
If you have any questions, comments, or complaints about this program, you can call 219-2-DAVID-P any time of day. It is our 24/7 voicemail line. Here is a voicemail. Lewis, we're taking a break from the hatriotism and hatriotics of the recent weeks with a positive voicemail, the rare positive voicemail.
Hello, this is the first time I'm viewing your show. It's refreshing. You do a great job of reporting certain situations, and you have good sources, so that's impressive. I really appreciate how interesting your show is and how different it is in terms of your opinions being so sincere and so right on.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
If nothing else, Lewis, the opinions expressed on this program are absolutely sincere. That's a good point.
That's got to count for something, I guess.
On today's bonus show, Lewis will tell us about how many people are still paying for America Online. Maybe I'll talk about my America Online late 90s chat room stories or something like that. That could be interesting. We will also talk about Japan stepping up to handle space debris and much more. The bonus show, hosted by Lewis, where I am the sidekick, is only one of many David Pakman Show member benefits. You also get a commercial-free members-only podcast feed that includes the bonus show. You get audio and video archives of the bonus show and the entire commercial-free David Pakman Show television program uploaded every day for members only. And coming up very soon, a David Pakman Show town hall where all David Pakman Show members will be invited to hang out with Lewis, hang out with me, ask questions about the show. Very, very exciting stuff. Last time, I think we did about an hour and 15 minutes before my laptop ultimately embarrassingly died. But in any case, all those and more benefits for supporters of the program. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. We will talk to you on the bonus show. The Friday show is tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.